So up to now we've talked about coding TNM objects in a horizontal plane. So now let's talk a bit about how to add elevations to the TNM objects. Elevations, otherwise known as z-coordinates, to give the three-dimensional aspect to the objects. So there's two methods to do this. If you have a three-dimensional contour file, then z-coordinates are assigned to contour lines, and these can be added to the CAD objects automatically using another software tool such as a digital ground model creator or a CADNA or SoundPlan or the MicroStation inroads program. So if you have the project data layer, you can create a topographic surface to drape the horizontal TNM objects on top of. And then you can get the z-coordinate data automatically in that way. So in most cases, that can be done, but there are some cases where contour files, the only contour files available are two-dimensional, and they have numerical values assigned to the topographic lines, but the z-coordinates are not physically in the file. So therefore, they have to be entered manually. And so that takes more work. It takes more work because the z-coordinates have to be entered manually into a spreadsheet such as Microsoft Excel. And that's the method that we'll look at in the following example. Here's an example of how to develop manual entry for TNM objects. So let's select this off-ramp line we coded earlier. It's now highlighted and we can see the points that we coded, these vertexes to the line. And so each point will have an X and a Y coordinate, and we have to assign a Z coordinate to each of these. And we have to do this by examining these terrain lines, or rather these topographic lines, and determining the Z value, and then manually writing them down, in this case on a spreadsheet. So our first point, this topo line, there's not a number indicated here, but this is a 125 elevation, and it lies in between these two lines. So we'll assign that to an elevation of 124.5, and we'll continue in the direction going from southwest to northeast, just to keep track of where we started, keeping track of these elevations and where we finished. This particular line that we have highlighted has 35 points on it. So we have the point numbers range from 1 to 35. So now we're going to pan to the northeast along this ramp so we can see how these points lie along this line. We'll pan a bit further to the end, and we can see the final value is pretty close to 130. So this is the 35th point along this line. So these are all from visually examining these contour values and then assigning these values. So there's a lot more work involved in this method of doing it, but as I said before, sometimes the three-dimensional contours aren't available, so we have to use this two-dimensional method. So that's an example using a roadway. So for a terrain line, we have this one over here, where this terrain line has a value of 120 across the entire line to describe this toe of slope. So it's 120. So we assign that to all 8 points of this line. I can highlight it. There's the 8 points, all with the same value. So that's an example of a line where the elevation varies versus one where It's constant. Okay, so we've coded all of our TNM objects in MicroStation. We've assigned elevations using either a two-dimensional or three-dimensional method, as we talked about in the previous steps. So now the next step is to export the DXF objects from CAD. So they have to be in a DXF format, and it has to be in this version 11.12 format for TNM to read it. And if we're using MicroStation, we use the selection set option within the export function. So let's look at that next. Okay, so we've prepared all of our TNM objects, and this is what it looks like when all the references and aerials are turned off. So these are all the objects that we've coded. Roadways, buildings, barriers, drain lines, and the receiver line, tree zone, ground zone. Okay. So what we want to do is create a layer, a DXF layer that contains only the existing roads. So we're going to turn off all the other layers and move this out of the way. So we're going to turn off this, 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 and this. So we're left with only the existing roads. We'll take the arrow, select all the objects, and then we'll go to File, Export, DGN, DWG, or DXF. We're going to select the option for a DXF file. We're going to review the options. The DWG version needs to be version 11.12 for TNM to recognize it. There are several other options here. 11.12 is the one that we need. We want to omit any of these other options and uncheck everything else just to make sure there's nothing else attached to the data. We just want bare bones coordinates for TNM to recognize it. For geometry, we're going to select the option for selection set so that it will look at only the options we've selected in this view. So we're going to click OK. We'll give this a meaningful name here. Existing roads. And then we will save it. And now, after some churning, there will be a DXF file containing this line work that we can then import into TNM in a later step.